And if you do those things, not only is it going to make your planting go easier, it's going to make your harvesting easier as well. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a wonderful day. It is Friday, June 13th here in South Georgia, and I'm about to plant some sweet potatoes. But before I do, I figured it'd be a good idea to give you some helpful tips that you should know before or while you're planting your sweet potatoes. Now, I do realize that a lot of you out there, if you were going to grow sweet potatoes this year, you probably have already planted them. But me personally, I like to wait until about the middle of June to plant mine. That way it's not so hot when it comes time to dig them. So it's plenty warm enough down here to plant sweet potatoes in early May, maybe even late April, but that means you're digging them in the dead heat of summer. So I instead like to wait to the middle of June, and maybe by the time these things are ready to harvest, it will start cooling off a little bit. So you can do that if you live in a warmer climate, have a really long growing season. You can kind of pick your spots a little bit. If you live in an area with a limited warm growing season, you got to be pretty timely with your planting, because you got to have at least 100 good days of hot weather for these things here. So let's jump right into our list. And number one is you want to revive your plants before planting. This is especially important if you're ordering your plants online and getting them shipped to you. Now, if you're growing your own sweet potato slips or plants at home, you can probably pluck them right off of there, put them in the ground, won't have any issues. But if these things are being shipped to you, they're probably going to look a little rough when you get them. So what I do, because I can do it down here, is I wait until Steel Plant Company, where I get my slips from, I wait until I find out when they're about to stop shipping for the year, and they've already stopped. I find out when they're about to stop, and that's when I order my plants. And I got these in the mail, I'm gonna say about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. When I get them in the mail, they can look a little rough sometimes, just depending on the ride they experience from their place to ours. So I put them in a little jar of water like this, and these have been in here for, like I said, week and a half, 2 weeks, and now they look a lot better, a lot more vibrant. Roots look healthy there. This is what you want to plant. You don't want to plant some wilted plants that have been sitting in a box traveling across the country for a few days. So take the time to revive your plants, put them in a jar of water, replace the water every few days, get them looking strong and healthy again before you put them in your soil, and they'll do a lot better for you. Number two, as is the case with almost everything we plant, you want to put down some balanced fertilizer before you plant. So we're going to be planting here right beside me in a minute. We put down some coop grow along those rows where we're planting. So you put it in the planting furrow or along your intended planting row. You could also just broadcast it over the entire plot. Sweet potato vines will pin down all over the plot, so you may want, even nutrition across the entire plot, but at least put some along the row where you're planting. Number three, try to make some nice mounds or ridges to plant into. This is going to be especially important if you have hard, compact soil. But even though we don't have hard, compact soil, I still do. So earlier today, Abram came out here and made me 3 mounds or ridges where our 3 rows are going to go today. He just took some of that bed mix that we use a lot around here and just piled it up along our planting row. I think he did a pretty fantastic job keeping it nice and straight and neat there. And so the reason I like to plant into the mounds is not because I have hard, compacted soil, but it makes harvesting so much easier. So if we're growing our sweet potatoes in a nice, fluffy, soft mound, going to make digging a whole lot easier. We can usually just dig them with our hands. We don't have to get a shovel or a digging fork to get them out of the ground. And those mounds also help tell us where our rows are, because when this plot gets entirely covered with sweet potato vines, sometimes it can be hard to tell where your actual planting row was or is and where you need to start digging. But with the elevated surface there, pretty easy to tell. And these mounds here aren't super tall, probably only 6 or 8 inches tall. They can certainly be taller and wider, and we may mound up the plants a little more once they get going and start vining a little bit. Tip number 4, you gotta wait for the soil to warm up before you can plant sweet potatoes. As I mentioned earlier, sweet potatoes love hot weather, so you want to wait until your soil temp is consistently above 65 degrees. Now, we've been consistently above 65 degrees for a while now down here, but that's what you're looking for. If you plant too early, they'll just kind of sit there. They don't love cool nights. They want warm weather. That's what they thrive in. Tip number 5, you got to give them enough room to do their thing. Now, there are traditional vining sweet potato varieties. That's what we're going to be planting today. And there are what they call vineless varieties that we have planted before in the raised bed, like Bunch Puerto Rico. I think the other one is called Vardaman. So those two varieties, they don't sprawl near as much. They're great for containers or raised beds. These traditional varieties that really spread out, you want to make sure you give them plenty of room, because you really don't want to be cutting those vines and compromising that growth. So put your rows at least 3 foot apart and give yourself plenty of room on the outside of those rows for those vines to sprawl. If they do start getting into your yard where you're mowing or something like that, try raking the vines back in towards the row as opposed to just cutting them with the mower. Because with these traditional varieties, at least, those vines are going to pin down all over the place, help absorb water and nutrients, and the more pinned down vines you've got, the more energy you can devote into making some really nice sweet potatoes. Tip number 6, you want to space your sweet potatoes accordingly. And we're talking about in-row spacing here. We're not talking about distance between 2 rows. Now you can put sweet potato plants as far apart as you want to put them. Say you've got a 30-foot row and you've only got 20 plants. You can space them out there. You don't have to put them all 10 to 12 inches apart. But there can be some advantages to putting them closer together. So as the sweet potatoes are maturing, as they're getting closer to that 100-day mark or 110-day mark, whatever the maturity date is for the variety you're growing, as they're getting closer to that mark, especially if you get a lot of rain at one time, those things can enlarge pretty quickly, and sometimes they can get too big. So if you crowd them a little bit, they won't get as big and gnarly looking sometimes. That's a tool or tip you can use. Maybe if you're not real timely with your harvesting, if you're not going to be out there kind of checking the size of them as often as you should be, plant them closer together, and that will give you a little more flexibility. Also, not a bad idea to plant them closer together if you like smaller sweet potatoes. If you don't want huge bacon sweet potatoes, you want smaller ones. Maybe you're cutting them up into little cubes for roasting, or maybe you're frying a lot of them and want smaller ones, a closer spacing may be better for you. Now before we get to our last tip, tip number 7, let's go ahead and get these plants in the ground here. Let me go through real quick what we'll be planting today. So the first variety I've got is called Purple Majesty. Now, it's been a while since I've planted any purple sweet potatoes, and traditionally purple sweet potatoes aren't very high yielding, but supposedly this variety here is one of the highest yielding purple varieties out there, and so I'm very excited to see how this one does. Then we've got one of my favorites that I grow every year, Orleans. Really makes a nice sweet potato for me, and I'm also growing Covington. Grown it before, but it's been a while since I've grown it. It's another variety that was developed by a university. It's supposed to be a little more improved than some of the older varieties out there. So we just poked those babies down into our little mounds there. Really easy to do when you got some nice, soft, fluffy soil. No need to plant them super deep. I'm just trying to get those existing roots they have covered with soil. Don't really plant them any deeper than that. You can see we got all 3 rows in, so we're good to go. And lastly, tip number 7, you got to water these things consistently early on. You got to baby them, as we like to say. Now once they are established, they're relatively drought tolerant, but early on you need to give them plenty of water so they can establish. Now I don't use drip irrigation on my sweet potatoes because I think it makes it a pain when it comes harvesting time. So I'll put an overhead sprinkler on this afternoon, and probably every afternoon for the next 3 or 4 days until I can tell they've set roots in that new soil and they're starting to put on new leaves. Then we can back off the water a little bit. So I hope you enjoyed that little short and sweet list of sweet potato planting tips. And if you do those things, not only is it going to make your planting go easier, it's going to make your harvesting easier as well. And let me know in the comments below if you're growing sweet potatoes this year, and if so, what varieties you're growing. And if you want to know more about those vineless varieties that are great for raised beds or containers, watch this video right here and we'll tell you more about those. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.